Hello, Bondhura. Welcome back to my vlog. So, in the last class about Pride and Prejudice, I had spoken about the first chapter and I was talking about the exposition to that book, and I was also talking about how the opening sentence of the book is so significant as it introduces the irony, the satire, that is the foundation for the entire book. If any of you haven't gone through that video, I will put the link in the description below. Please check that one out, and I hope it will be very helpful as well. Now, again, I would ask all of you to like, subscribe, and comment. Everybody does that, and I might as well. যদিও বলে লাভ হচ্ছে না, দেখছো অথচ চলে যাচ্ছ, সেই জন্য আমি আবার বলছি, please like, share, and subscribe my videos. Now, in the last class, we had spoken about the opening of Pride and Prejudice. I had also given an exposition to the book. I have said that why Pride and Prejudice is more than just a book about love and romance, how important social realities have been exposed in Pride and Prejudice. Now, the first chapter is wonderfully written by Jane Austen. It kind of exposes all the hidden sort of subtleties that this book will take up. One of the major themes that comes up in Pride and Prejudice is marriage. Whether it should be a marriage of convenience or whether it should be a marriage of sense and sensibility. Now, one of the marriages of convenience is, of course, that of Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. And the fact that they are not meant to be together, that they are absolutely bringing together of very awkward, weird people, has been very nicely developed and brought up in the very first chapter. So I had already spoken about the opening sentences, and I have shown how ironical and how sarcastic they are. Please, once again, the link will be in the description. If anybody has missed that, you can go back and check it out. Now, few things that I would like to read from the first chapter is the young man who is in need of so-called bride, and I have shown that no young men in the book are ever in need of brides. It's the young women who are always in needs of brides. So these young men who are in need of brides, how are they treated by the society? He is considered the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters. So, just as this society, this hypocritical society, gives no independence and no equality, to the girls, similarly, was it doing any favor to the boys? No, it wasn't. The fact that the boys were considered to be a prized possession, it was also kind of objectifying the men of the society. Everyone wanted to have them, and as a result, these men, they never had any privacy. They were always hounded, almost chased and hounded by the mothers and fathers of marriageable girls. So they were also objectified. It wasn't doing any good neither to the boys nor to the girls. যে কোনো খারাপ জিনিস কখনো এটা হয় না যে একজনের জন্য ভালো আরেকজনের জন্য খারাপ, যেটা খারাপ সেটা সবার জন্যই খারাপ। এবং এই হিপোক্রিটিক্যাল সোসাইটিও মেয়েদের তো সর্বনাশ করছেই, কিন্তু ছেলেদেরও খুব একটা কিছু ভালো হচ্ছে না আর কি। And then the problem that we have in the marriage between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet has also been brought up in the same chapter. কি বলা হচ্ছে? So of course Mrs. Bennet is very anxious. She has 5 marriageable girls, and knowing the social reality, we cannot blame her very much. ওনাকে খুব একটা দোষ দেওয়া যেতে পারে না, সোসাইটিটাই তো এরকম. So she is always in search for better grooms for her daughters, and she is very excited. And excitemenটের কারণটা কি? excitemenটের কারণটা হচ্ছে but it is returned she, for Mrs. Long has just been here and she told me all about it. Mr. Bennet made no answer. Mr. Bennet is not excited about it. আর তারপরে কি বলছে? Why, my dear, you must know Mrs. Long says that Netherfield is taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England. তাহলে the Netherfield estate has been taken by a young man, one of the requirement for being a good groom. And the second reason is large fortune, borolok, he's very rich. So the second criteria also ticked. Whether he is like-minded, whether he's compatible, whether he's understanding, whether he has a good character, good nature, doesn't matter at all. He is young and he has a lot of fortune. Done. And then she goes on to say that he is take possession before and then Mr. Bennet asks, what is his name? Bingley. First time we are introduced to one of the very important characters in the book, and his name is Mr. Bingley. Is he married or single? So Mr. Bennet just asks casually, is he married or is he single? Look at Mrs. Bennet's excitement. Oh, single, my dear, to be sure. A single man of large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls. So, of course, this man is single. He has a large fortune. He is a young man and perfect for our daughters. Ar kichu lagbe na. There's no other requirement whatsoever. And, of course, Mr. Bennet is very surprised. What? And he says, how so? How can it affect them? So how is he going to change the life of my daughters? You know, what connection does he has with my daughters? And then Mrs. Bennet replies, oh dear Mr. Bennet, replied his wife, how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I am thinking of his marrying one of them. So the reason for the excitement is nothing but the fact that Mr. Bingley is here. Mr. Bingley is young and he has a large fortune. Mrs. Bennet has 5 daughters and the equation is clear. She wants to get one of her daughters married to Mr. Bingley. Doesn't matter whether they like him, whether he likes them, whether he already is engaged or he has a fiancée. Nothing. They need to know nothing. Just the fact that he is a young man and he has a good fortune, enables Mrs. Bennet to make a quick choice that he can be a possible groom for one of her daughters. And then Mr. Bennet, and I had said in the earlier class also that Mr. Bennet is a rational thinker. He has a very philosophical bent of mind, and most importantly, he tries to analyze things, and he says, is that his design in setting here? So is that his plan? Is he coming here because he wants to get married? So of course, that is important too. And look at what Mrs. Bennet has to say. Design? Nonsense. How can you talk so? But it is very likely that he may fall in love with one of them and therefore you may visit him as soon as he comes. So he's like, plan, design, does that even matters? If he even doesn't has a design, it is our responsibility to make him fall in love with one of our girls. So everything has to be constructed so that we cannot let him go without getting one of our daughters married to him. So consent, sort of whether he likes, he dislikes, doesn't matter at all. Everything is constructed, planned according to the norms of the society. I see no occasion for that. You and the girls may go, for you may send them by themselves, which perhaps will be still better. And I had always said, or in the previous video, I had said that Mr. Bennet is not a very social person. He loves to be by himself in his library, and he denies to go anywhere, and he's like, okay, you have a plan and it seems a very silly plan, you go ahead with it, I do not want to take part in it at all. And then Mrs. Bennet is of course not buying that, and she is like, but my dear, you must indeed go and see Mr. Bingley when he comes into the neighborhood. So she keeps on insisting, and sometimes she is very whiny and very persistent, which is at times very, very irritating. But again, I have to say that, please do not judge her. Being a mother of girls, I can understand some of her, even in the 21st century, I can understand some of her cares and concerns. It's not difficult to step into her shoes, even 300 years after. So I can understand how this lack of independence, the financial independence for girls, how that can create a sense of terrible insecurity in the minds of the mothers, and can force them into doing something which is absolutely irrational. However, Mrs. Bennet is irrational to the point of being ludicrous. She is probably exaggerating it a lot, etotao na korleo hoto. And Mr. Bennet is of course very soft-spoken, and he gives in and he says that, you mistake me, my dear. I have high respect for your nerves. They are my old friends. I've heard you mention them with the consideration these last 20 years at least. So he has a very good sense of humor, but unfortunately, you need a certain sense of intelligence to gauge such kind of humor. It is probably completely over Mrs. Bennet's comprehension. Oh, kichhui bujhlo na. Mr. Bennet was so odd, a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve and caprice, that the experience of 3 and 20 years had been sufficient to make his wife understand his character. Her mind was less difficult to develop. Now, whenever we get a question on the important characters that contribute to the story, please do not forget to mention Mr. Bennet, because Elizabeth, the main character, the protagonist, is largely created through Mr. Bennet's ideas. It is Mr. Bennet's parenting that has had a very good influence on Elizabeth and her thinking. So whenever you are writing, and even when you are writing about Elizabeth, do not forget to mention about Mr. Bennet. All this sarcasm, humor, reasonability, analytic thinking, all that we see in Mr. Bennet is in a way present in Elizabeth, not just in a way in a large quantity actually. So that was the end of the first chapter. It gives an exposition with a very good satirical opening sentence. It also introduces us to one of the main themes of the book, that is marriage. It also tells us how desperate the women of the time were to get married and the reasons behind it. I mean, whenever you read this, you are of course intrigued to know that what is the desperation, eto paglami keno, ki ba karon chilo. So of course it will lead you to the investigation of the reasons. It shows us the funny couple pairing of Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. Although we may laugh at them, like how they are so poles apart, but it also makes us think, be a little uncomfortable that these are two people who are there together for 23 years or so, and they have raised 5 kids. Ki kore shombhob holo. So I'll keep it till here for today's class. Please visit my videos again for extended discussion on characterization in Pride and Prejudice. Ar jodi kichu jante chao, if you have any queries, if you have any suggestion, please leave a comment. Till then, bye-bye.